Okay, now here are my inputs, right? Now I only put them there just for my own sake. Here's where the real work begins. What calculations are we going to need to have? Okay, now you'll notice I'm doing all of this kind of, line by line work before I put together, cells, right? And the design of each one, because I want to know all the things I've got to fit into this before I draw out where they're going to fit. If you like, it's a bit like, which do you design first? A car's body, its outside body, or all the things that are going to fit into it? Well, you probably want to design the things that fit into it first, like say the engine, right? Rather than, we've designed the outside body first, and the engine we designed after doesn't fit in. And I could see when some of you had done your spreadsheet, and you had your cells there, you'd start to lay it out, and then as you went through and did your calculations later, you're like, I'm missing bits, right? And then it sort of grew off, went on a different 9 degrees perpendicular on the page because you're trying to squeeze it in because your engine was too big for the body of your car, okay? So that's why I'm doing all of this first, right? Okay, now I think I had 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 calculations, okay? Now, it wasn't like 1 mark for every single calculation, okay? I was giving a mark to, okay, did we identify all the inputs, okay? I gave a mark, or 2 marks, to the actual layout and if it was logical, okay? So don't treat these as like you had to get every single one in order to get your 10 marks, but whatever you did have, it had to be accurate and it had to cover all of the bases that were mentioned earlier, okay? Now, one more thing. When I describe all of this stuff, I'm going to describe it without reference to any cells, okay, for 2 reasons. Number 1, I don't have any cells yet. Like, I don't know what A1 and B5 and all that kind of thing are, right? And number 2, everyone and their dog had a different, completely, separate design with everything rearranged differently. So even if I gave you cells here, right, it would be meaningless for yours. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to describe each cell, right? And this is the way you can construct yours. Then when you put together your design and you've got your, you know which rows and which columns refer to what, then you can say, all right, this is going to be A5, this will be C7, and so on. All right, now, the first thing I'm going to work out. If I want to work out where am I going to end, I'm going to end on profits. Profits. You tell me, what kinds of things are we going to need to know if we want profits? What is a profit?
How much you earn minus the cost.
Yeah, great. So you buy something and then you sell it to someone else, you make a profit, right? So the 2 things you need to know are, how much did you pay for it in the first place? That's a cost. And then how much did you sell it for afterwards, right? So your sales price, okay? So I'm going to go for sales first, right? Because it comes first. So total sales. And each of these calculations is different from year to year, okay? So for every one of these calculations, I'm going to have one for year 2014, one for 2015, and so on, okay? So total sales. Now, where does this relate to these? How am I going to relate to? What is it related to? Well, if I want to think about what a sales from one year to the next is, I've got my previous year's sales, right? I know that from here, okay? I've got past year's sales records, okay? And I think, okay, next year, I think the total sales will be, now, what other piece of information do I need to put it with? Past year's sales records plus, well, times, actually, what? What's it going to relate to? Yeah, that's right. I'm like, this is what happened last year, and this is what I'd like to happen, or what I predict will happen next year, right? So I'm going to multiply this by, now, what shall I multiply by? This percentage sales increase, a percentage is like, say, 0.2. Okay, that would be 20%, right? So I'm not going to multiply by 0.2. What am I going to multiply by? 1.2. Yeah, 1.2, right? So I've got to say the percentage sales increase, sorry, that's an S, increase plus 1. Ta-da! Okay, so you can see how I was looking for you to be careful in how you actually created your formulas. Okay, and this will all be cells, which makes it harder for me to read, but at least you can see what they mean. Okay. Okay, now they did want you to take into account inflation, right? So if you get this number, what is inflation? Inflation means as years pass, right, the same amount of money can't buy as much stuff, right? So it's like, let's see. Do you guys remember, what's the cheapest fuel you ever remember from the youngest age you were? Because right, yeah. 118? Can anyone go cheaper than that? 100? Does anyone remember prices below 100? Let's just go unleaded. Just unleaded. 90? In the 90s? Yeah? Okay. I remember the cheapest fuel that I actually remember seeing when I was like sitting in the back and watching my dad fill up. I remember it in the 70s, okay? 70 cents a liter, okay? And people were like, wow, you know, prices of fuel are really going up. Can you believe we're paying 70 cents a liter? And I'm like, I didn't know any better, so I was like, oh, okay. Imagine what they would say now, right? So back then, and I think that was about, I think my memory must have gone back, say, 20 years. So I was like, I don't know, 7 or 8 or something like that, okay? So in 20 years, inflation has gone from 70 cents a liter fuel to like $1.40 fuel. So prices have, oh yeah, it's $1.50, yeah. I filled up for $1.40 the other day, but I had like special vouchers and stuff, okay? So the prices of objects has inflated, right? So if I want to work out what the difference is between how much I've sold and how much that's really going to be worth, right, after the price of things is taken into account, what am I going to have to do? Well, I'll take these total sales, and you could either multiply or divide, but it made probably more sense to divide. Now, what should I divide by? Now, just like this is a percentage sales increase, right? I've got my inflation rate. Actually, these are all percentages. I should have just put that at the beginning. Okay. So the inflation rate, right? It's just like the tax rate. It's just like the sales increase rate. I have to divide by 1 plus. Sorry, that's a plus, not a 4. The inflation rate. Okay. And every year, the inflation rate happens again and again and again. Okay, that's why prices increase gradually, right? So you're actually going to need to raise this thing to a power. And that's how you raise a power, right? With that little hat symbol, okay? Yeah, so if you're like, oops, right? So these are the kinds of things I was looking for, right? So you would have raised it to some power, whatever year you were, like 1 year after this year, 2 years after this year, 3 years after this year. That's all. Okay, now by the way, you're like, I didn't do any of this. That's why we're doing this review now, so the next time you will, okay? So, right, 2 calculations out of 10, right? Now, that's going to be my sales. What did we say profit was? Profit was how much you sold it for minus what? Costs. How much everything is actually costing you, right? So I'm going to have a goods cost. This is kind of nice because I'm going to get 3 calculations here that are all very similar. Okay, I've got a goods cost, an admin cost, right? What was the other cost? Marketing. Okay, so how do I get all of these, right? Now, I know these as percentages, right? So how do I convert that into like dollars? I'm going to convert that to dollars. Any takers? Good. Now, percent of total sales. So I need the total sales in here. Sorry, total sales? Yes. Okay. And then I'm going to multiply it by, let's see here, the percent that goods costs, right? And then the percent that admin costs, and then the percent that marketing costs, okay? So those are going to be my costs. So percentage of goods, and it continues down here, right? It's the same. It's total sales times percentage admin, and this is the total sales times the percentage of marketing. Okay? So that's going to give me my costs altogether. So I say, let's see, total cost, right? Is this plus this plus this, okay? So that's the sum of, now you could just say this plus this plus this, or you could use a sum function, which is kind of a bit neater, but it's not that big a deal. So goods cost, admin cost, and marketing cost. Or whatever cells they refer to. Okay? Okay, we're doing well. Why do we work out sales and costs? Because we wanted profits, right? Yes, good. So, profit. We said this right at the beginning, or Pock said it right at the beginning, right? It's going to be total sales minus total costs. Okay, yes? So far, so good. Okay. Now, I've got to do two things to this profit before I have my final answer. My final answer is going to be accurate predictions of post-tax profit. Post-tax profit. Okay? So what am I going to have to do here? I know what the tax rate is. Okay? And I'm going to get taxed on whatever profit I've got. Okay? So I'm going to say tax is going to be, well, how much did you earn? That's your profit. And then I'm going to multiply that by the tax rate. Yeah? Can you see how all the pieces, doing all that work earlier and saying, okay, here are all the pieces of the jigsaw I got to fit together, it makes this so much easier. Because you're like, oh, well, this is left over. I've got to use it eventually, right? So there's my profit times my tax rate. So this is my tax. Okay. So now I can say, okay, how much did I really come out after the ATO nicked off with some of my money? Okay. So we would call that, you can call it whatever you like, but net profit is a good way to put it. Okay. So that's profit minus tax. Okay, does that make sense? Now, how many equations is this? Count with me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, now I said there were 10. What am I missing? Because net profit, that sounds pretty good, right? That looks like I'm done.
Gross. Gross.
I already have my gross profit. I just didn't call it that. Good pick up, but I have actually calculated it. What am I missing? And remember we were talking about petrol, right? Why were we talking about petrol?
It inflates.
It inflates, right? And we took that into account here, right? We said when you set, you make sales, okay, then it's going to be, its value will change based on inflation. Guess what? The same thing is going to happen to your profits. You're like, I made $1 million, in 2050, okay? And then someone's like, dude, in 2050, your $1 million won't even buy a Big Mac, okay? So we've got to take into account, well, you know what it's like? Has anyone been to one of those countries where it's like, you go to buy something, yeah, and it's like, yeah, that'll be 15 million rupees or something. You're like, what? I don't know, 15 million. And then someone's like, yeah, here's a $5, you'll be fine, okay? So my net profit, right? I'm going to have to adjust that for inflation as well. So net profit with inflation. Okay, and to adjust for inflation, I do the same thing that I did before. I take the net profit and then I divide. Divided by the inflation rate plus 1 to the power of however many years we are in the future. Okay, so that the more years we've gone, the more inflation has had its effect. Okay, I suppose I should put more brackets around that. Okay. All right, now. Exhale, right? That was the bulk of the work. You did really well if you stay with me that long, okay? Now, how do you put this all together into an actual spreadsheet, right? Now, I think you sort of had to decide for yourself, should I put years, like 2014, 15, 16, 17, should I put it across the top or as columns, or should I put them as rows, okay? I think you worked out better, if you could do either, is fine. But I think you worked out better if you went time across the top, okay? So, for example, say 2013, or actually 2012, because that's in the past, so I know it, okay? So this is facts, okay? I'm going to have one column for those, and then I'm going to have all these predictions. I've run out of space, but you should have one more for 5 years, right? Now, all of this stuff here, I'll put it in another color. All of this stuff here is calculations. All those calculations we just mentioned up above, right? all of this over here for all the subsequent years. Okay, you get the idea, right? But what's the data that we actually know about each of the things? Well, it's going to be all of, not this stuff, sorry, all of this stuff here, right? So I'm going to need to have, let's see here. I'm going to have total sales. I'm going to have sales with inflation. I'm going to have costs. I'm going to have profits. All of the calculations we just made, they're all going to go down here, okay? Now, you're going to have somewhere for your inputs, right? So, maybe you want to put all of your inputs down here. Stuff like, we already mentioned them, right? Tax rate, inflation rate, and so on, okay? So maybe you just want to tuck them down here, and all of your equations up here. Let me see if I can put it all on at once. Can I zoom out? I can zoom out, right? Yeah, perfect. There you go. So all of your inputs here, tax rate, inflation rate, all the percentages for the different sales, how much you think next year your sales will increase, that's all down here, and it will affect all of these calculations. All of this will be pulled out from either calculations or the previous year's database. Okay?